It all began with the screech of tires and the sickening crunch of metal under the unforgiving Arizona sun. On October 14, 2025, just another sweltering Tuesday at the Lukeville port of entry, a produce truck suffered a catastrophic brake failure. The vehicle swerved violently, its heavy load shifting, before it jackknifed and slammed into a concrete barrier. The accident was messy, blocking a major artery connecting the United States and Mexico. But what spilled onto the asphalt that day was far more sinister than bruised fruit. It was a discovery that would rip the lid off a billion-dollar narco empire and expose a threat of unimaginable scale. As first responders and border agents rushed to the scene, their initial concern was for the driver and clearing the wreckage, but a strange, almost clinical neatness about some of the cargo raised immediate red flags. Hidden beneath layers of legitimate produce were several nondescript, cardboard boxes, perfectly sealed and strangely heavy for their size. An experienced Customs and Border Protection officer, trained to spot the unusual, felt his gut tighten. There was something wrong here, something dangerously out of place amidst the chaos of the crash. This wasn't just a simple traffic accident, it was the first thread in a tapestry of death that was about to unravel. The boxes were carefully moved to a secure inspection area. Inside, agents found what they had feared, but on a level that left even the most seasoned veterans aghast. They uncovered 42 kilograms of a fine white powder. It wasn't cocaine, it was fentanyl, but this was unlike any fentanyl they had ever encountered. Lab tests came back with a purity level that was simply off the charts, an astonishing 99.4%. This was not street-level dope cut with fillers. This was weapons-grade poison, a chemical so pure and potent that it defied all previous intelligence. The single shipment contained enough raw material to create 84 million lethal doses, enough to kill every man, woman, and child in California twice over. The alarm bells didn't just ring, they screamed through the highest corridors of federal law enforcement. The sheer purity of the seizure was a calling card, a signature of a producer with terrifyingly advanced chemical capabilities. This wasn't the work of a makeshift lab in a remote jungle. This was the product of a sophisticated, industrial-scale operation. The FBI was immediately looped in, and a multi-agency task force was scrambled. They knew they weren't just chasing drug smugglers anymore. They were hunting the architects of a chemical plague, a hidden factory of death operating somewhere in the vast, desolate expanse of the Sonoran Desert. The clock was ticking. The name that quickly surfaced in the frantic early hours of the investigation was Mauricio Salazar. For years, he had been a phantom, a ghost in the intelligence machine, his name whispered in connection with a new and terrifyingly efficient drug trafficking model. But the 99.4% pure fentanyl found at Lukeville was his definitive signature. It confirmed that Salazar was no ordinary cartel boss. He was a biochemist, a logistics mastermind who had transformed the drug trade from a crude agricultural business into a streamlined industrial process. He wasn't just moving drugs, he was manufacturing death on a scale that threatened to overwhelm entire nations. Salazar's operation was a paradigm shift in narco-trafficking. He had abandoned the unpredictable and labor-intensive cultivation of opium poppies in favor of pure chemistry. His product was synthetic, created from precursor chemicals that were easier to source and transport. This allowed him to control every aspect of production, from the raw materials to the final pill press. His network wasn't a loose collection of gangs, it was a vertically integrated corporation. It had research and development, manufacturing and distribution, all run with the ruthless efficiency of a Fortune 500 company. El Forjador, a name that roughly translates to the lined one, hinting at his methodical nature, was playing a different game entirely. The danger posed by this new model could not be overstated. A single kilogram of Salazar's pure fentanyl could be stretched and pressed into millions of pills, each one a potential overdose. The profit margins were astronomical, dwarfing those of cocaine or heroin. This financial power allowed him to arm his enforcers with military-grade weaponry and corrupt officials on an unprecedented scale. He was building more than just a drug empire. He was building a rogue state funded by poison. His operation represented a direct threat to the national security of the United States, a chemical insurgency waged from the shadows of the desert. For the FBI and their partners, the Lukeville seizure was a terrifying confirmation of their worst fears. They were facing an enemy who weaponized chemistry and logistics. The 400-kilogram shipment that had been planned, of which the crashed truck was only a small part, was not just a drug deal, it was an act of mass poisoning intended for American streets. The agents realized they had to move faster than ever before. They had to find the source, the factory where this poison was being synthesized, and they had to shut it down before another, even larger shipment found its way across the border. The hunt for Salazar's factory became the single most urgent priority for a newly formed tri-agency task force. The FBI brought its investigative prowess, U.S. naval intelligence contributed its sophisticated surveillance technology, and the U.S. Navy SEALs were placed on standby for the inevitable confrontation. The search area was a massive 37-square-mile dead zone straddling the Arizona-Sonora border, a desolate and lawless region known for its harsh terrain and lack of official oversight. It was the perfect place to hide a secret, especially one that needed to remain invisible to prying eyes and thermal cameras. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. U.S. naval intelligence analysts who were tasked with scanning the desert for anomalies. They weren't looking for buildings, they were looking for what shouldn't be there. They detected an unusual pattern of underground heat signatures. While Salazar's operation was sophisticated, it wasn't perfect. The chemical reactors needed to synthesize fentanyl generate immense heat, and cooling them is a massive challenge. Salazar had built 14 separate underground cooling systems, but the faint thermal bloom was still detectable by the Navy's advanced sensors. They had found the industrial complex's Achilles heel. On-the-ground surveillance and satellite imagery began to paint a clearer picture. The operation was cleverly disguised. From the surface, it looked like nothing more than 7 abandoned garages and dilapidated workshops scattered across the desert floor, the kind of forgotten structures you see all along the border. But beneath them lay a hidden world. These buildings were merely entry points to a sprawling underground complex. This was Salazar's biochemical machine, a subterranean factory floor housing massive chemical reactors, pill presses, and packaging stations. It was powered by 11 stolen commercial generators, their noise muffled by the earth above. The scale of the facility was breathtaking. Intelligence reports confirmed it was capable of producing a staggering 2.6 million fentanyl pills every single 24 hours. The complex was a self-contained city of death, complete with living quarters for its guards, and, as investigators would soon learn, a prison for its unwilling workforce. Salazar had created a fortress, a narco-industrial complex hidden in plain sight. The agents now knew where the beast lived. The next challenge was figuring out how to slay it without getting everyone, including potential hostages, killed in the process. As the investigation deepened, a horrifying new dimension to Salazar's cruelty emerged. Cross-referencing missing persons reports with intelligence gathered on the compound's activities, the FBI made a chilling connection. They believed that several missing Americans, individuals who had vanished near the border over the past year, were not victims of random violence. Instead, they were prisoners, forced into slave labor inside Salazar's chemical fortress. These were not criminals. They were ordinary people, caught in a nightmare. 3 were long-haul truck drivers, 2 were skilled mechanics, 1 was a warehouse worker, and another was a retired U.S. Navy veteran. These men had been targeted specifically for their skills. Salazar needed drivers to move precursors, mechanics to maintain his generators and vehicles, and laborers to handle the dangerous chemicals. He had built his empire on the backs of abducted, enslaved Americans. The intelligence suggested they were being held in a buried chamber deep within the compound, forced to work grueling 16-hour shifts in hellish conditions. They were surrounded by toxic fumes and armed guards with no hope of escape. Their lives were considered expendable, just another resource to be consumed by the cartel's insatiable machine. The urgency of the mission immediately escalated. This was no longer just a drug raid, it was a hostage rescue. The agents knew that time was running out for the captives. Medical experts consulted by the task force painted a grim picture. Prolonged exposure to the chemicals and the brutal working conditions would be taking a severe toll. The hostages were likely suffering from extreme dehydration, malnutrition, and the early stages of organ failure. Every hour that passed pushed them closer to the breaking point. The planned raid now carried the heavy burden of saving innocent lives. For the operators preparing to assault the compound, the mission became deeply personal. The thought of fellow Americans being held captive, forced to produce the very poison that was killing people back home, fueled their determination. They were not just fighting to stop a flow of drugs, They were fighting to bring their countrymen home. The plan had to be perfect, executed with speed and overwhelming force. Any hesitation, any mistake, could result in the execution of the hostages. The fate of 7 innocent men now rested squarely on their shoulders. The mission was codenamed Operation Dust Devil, which honestly felt like a fitting name for the storm of controlled violence federal agents were about to unleash on Salazar's desert fortress. In the final hours leading up to the raid, the atmosphere at the forward operating base was, well, thick with tension and focus. A force of 300 federal agents had been assembled, a potent mix of tactical expertise. The spearhead would be 72 elite operators from the FBI's hostage rescue team, Border Patrol's BORTAC unit, and the legendary U.S. Navy SEAL Team 2. These were the best of the best, trained for exactly this kind of high-stakes, no-fail scenario. The plan was meticulously choreographed down to the second. The assault would begin under the cover of pre-dawn darkness on October 16, 2025. The operators studied detailed schematics of the compound, memorizing every building, every potential line of fire, and the location of the suspected hostage chamber. They knew the cartel would be well-armed and ready for a fight. Intelligence indicated the presence of at least 21 heavily armed gunmen, equipped with military-grade weapons like RPK light machine guns and modern AK-103 rifles. This was not just a gang of thugs, it was a small, disciplined army defending a billion-dollar prize. One piece of intelligence, though, cast a dark shadow over the entire operation. Analysts had identified a potential fail-safe device, a massive fuel-air explosive. The system was believed to contain nearly 1,000 gallons of vaporized fuel, rigged to a timer. If detonated, it would create a catastrophic fireball, incinerating the entire compound in seconds. This meant the raid was a race against 2 clocks. They had to neutralize the guards and secure the hostages before they could be executed, and they had to find and disarm the bomb before it wiped everything and everyone off the map. As the operators geared up, checking their weapons, night vision gear, and communication equipment one last time, a quiet resolve settled over them. They were moving into the heart of darkness, into a fortified compound run by a ruthless killer, with the lives of 7 innocent men hanging in the balance. The risks were immense. A single misplaced shot could trigger a bloodbath. A missed wire could lead to a fiery apocalypse, but there was no turning back. The command was given, and under the cloak of night, the helicopters and armored vehicles began to move toward their target. The Dust Devil was about to strike. At precisely 4:29 a.m., the desert silence was shattered by a deafening explosion. A breach charge blew a gaping hole in the compound's perimeter wall, and the assault began. Elite operators from HRT, BORTAC, and the SEALs poured through the opening, their movements fluid and precise in the pale green glow of their night vision goggles. They fanned out, moving with practiced speed toward their designated targets. The raid was a symphony of controlled aggression, each team executing its part of the plan with lethal efficiency. The element of surprise was total, but it wouldn't last long. The cartel's response was swift and brutal. Gunfire erupted from defensive positions as Salazar's enforcers, jolted from their sleep, grabbed their weapons, and opened fire. The air filled with the deafening roar of automatic weapons and the whip crack of bullets ricocheting off metal and concrete. The federal agents returned fire, their training taking over as they suppressed enemy positions and advanced deeper into the compound. In the chaotic opening moments, a fierce firefight raged, with muzzle flashes illuminating the darkness. The operators neutralized 8 hostile gunmen in the initial push, their superior training and tactics overcoming the cartel's raw firepower. While the main assault force engaged the guards, a specialized FBI bomb disposal team raced against the clock. They located the fuel-air explosive device, a monstrous contraption wired to a digital timer. The red numbers were counting down relentlessly. With bullets flying around them, the specialists worked with steady hands and nerves of steel, cutting wires and disabling triggers. At 4:47 a.m., with a heart-stopping 0.3 seconds remaining on the timer, they disarmed the device. They had averted a catastrophe that would have created a 650-foot fireball, vaporizing everything and everyone within its blast radius. Simultaneously, a SEAL team breached the underground chamber where the hostages were being held. They found the 7 missing Americans, gaunt and terrified, in a squalid, buried cell. The operators quickly secured them, providing immediate medical aid and moving them out of the firefight. Just minutes earlier, at 4:44 a.m., The mission's primary target, Mauricio Salazar, was captured. He had attempted to flee in a helicopter as the raid began, but a designated marksman had disabled the aircraft's tail rotor, forcing it down. Salazar was taken into custody, without a fight, his reign of terror brought to an abrupt and violent end. As the sun rose over the captured compound, the true scale of Salazar's empire came into full view. The scene was one of controlled chaos as federal agents began the painstaking process of cataloging the spoils of their war. The sheer volume of drugs and precursor chemicals seized was staggering. Inside the underground labs and warehouses, teams found 3.2 tons of fentanyl and methamphetamine precursors. The raw materials alone had a street value estimated between $1.8 and $2.1 billion. This wasn't just a drug bust, it was the dismantling of a chemical weapons factory. The financial heart of the operation was also laid bare. Stashed in various locations throughout the compound, agents discovered pallets of shrink-wrapped cash totaling a staggering $18.6 million. This was the liquid capital of the empire, the profits from untold misery, ready to be laundered or used to bribe officials and purchase more weapons. Speaking of weapons, the arsenal recovered from the compound was formidable. Agents cataloged 112 firearms, including 17 military-grade rifles like the RPKs and AK-103s used in the firefight. Salazar had armed his men for a war, and that is exactly what they got. Beyond the drugs, cash, and guns, the raid crippled Salazar's logistical capabilities. 5 refrigerated trucks, essential for transporting the finished product and precursor chemicals without detection, were seized on site. These vehicles were the lifeblood of his distribution network, allowing him to move massive quantities of poison across the border under the guise of legitimate commerce. The loss of this fleet was a devastating blow, severing the link between the factory and the streets it supplied. The entire supply chain, from chemical synthesis to final delivery, had been shattered in a single night. The rescued hostages were immediately airlifted to a secure medical facility. They were found to be suffering from extreme dehydration, with fluid loss measured between 28 and 34%, a level that puts a person on the brink of total organ failure. Each man had lost between 8 and 10 kilograms of body weight. They were shadows of their former selves, but they were alive. Their rescue was the ultimate victory of Operation Dust Devil, a powerful reminder of the human cost of the drug trade and the profound importance of bringing our people home. The capture of Mauricio Salazar and the seizure of his digital devices opened a Pandora's box of corruption that reached both sides of the border. This wasn't just a story about a brilliant and ruthless cartel boss, it was a story about the men in uniform who sold their souls to help him. Interrogations and forensic analysis of encrypted ledgers and communication logs revealed a sickening network of betrayal. Salazar's billion-dollar empire was not built on chemistry alone. It was propped up by a foundation of bribery that had compromised the very people sworn to protect the border. The investigation uncovered deep-seated corruption within U.S. law enforcement. The evidence was undeniable, pointing to 3 American border officers who were on Salazar's payroll. These officers had accepted bribes ranging from $40,000 to a staggering $310,000. In exchange for the dirty money, they turned a blind eye, waving through trucks that they knew were carrying poison into their own country. One officer was found to be directly responsible for allowing at least 27 uninspected vehicle crossings, each one a potential Trojan horse filled with millions of lethal doses of fentanyl. They had traded their badges and their honor for cash. The rot was just as deep, if not deeper, on the Mexican side of the border. Salazar's ledgers detailed payments to 6 Mexican federal officers. These officials provided him with protection, intelligence on law enforcement movements, and safe passage for his shipments of precursor chemicals. They were his eyes and ears, ensuring his operation could function without interference from their own government. The corruption created a seamless corridor for his criminal enterprise, a protected lane where the rules did not apply. This binational web of deceit was critical to the empire's success and longevity. The exposure of this corruption sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies in both the United States and Mexico. It was a brutal reminder that the enemy is not always on the other side of a wall. Sometimes the enemy is within, wearing the same uniform, betraying the public's trust for personal gain. The arrests of these corrupt officers were almost as significant as the capture of Salazar himself. It sent a clear and powerful message. There is no hiding place for those who aid and abet these merchants of death. The fight against the cartels must also be a fight to cleanse our own ranks. Operation Dust Devil was more than just a successful raid. It was a landmark victory in the relentless war against synthetic drugs. By dismantling Mauricio Salazar's industrial-scale operation, federal agents did not just seize a massive quantity of fentanyl, they prevented a chemical tidal wave from crashing onto American shores. The 400-kilogram shipment they intercepted was destined for communities across the country, from major cities to small towns, where it would have fueled addiction, shattered families, and left a trail of death. This operation saved countless lives, many of whom will never know how close they came to a lethal dose manufactured in that desert factory. The raid highlights a critical shift in national strategy. As demonstrated by other major takedowns, like the one targeting the Weymouth Street organization in Philadelphia's Kensington neighborhood, law enforcement is adapting. They are no longer just chasing street-level dealers. They are targeting the heads of the snake, the sophisticated corporate-style organizations that run the global drug trade. The use of advanced intelligence, multi-agency collaboration, and elite tactical units, as seen in the Arizona raid, represents the new playbook. This is a more focused, more aggressive, and more effective approach to dismantling these complex criminal enterprises from the top down. The rescue of the 7 American hostages serves as a stark and powerful reminder of the human cost of this war. The cartels are not just faceless corporations, they are brutal regimes that prey on the innocent. Their cruelty knows no bounds, and their methods include kidnapping, enslavement, and murder. The fight against them is not just about public health, it is a fight for basic human decency and justice. The successful rescue reaffirms a sacred promise that America will move heaven and earth to bring its citizens home, no matter how dangerous the path or how deep they are hidden in enemy territory. Ultimately, the fall of Salazar's empire is a line drawn in the sand. It is a declaration that America will not surrender its communities to the poison of synthetic drugs. It shows that even the most sophisticated and well-hidden operations can be found and destroyed. But this is one battle in a much larger war. For every Salazar that is captured, another is waiting to take his place. The fight requires constant vigilance, unwavering resolve, and the courage to confront corruption wherever it is found. The heroes of Operation Dust Devil have shown us the way. Now, the work must continue. Our nation's future depends on it.